Let's have a look at all of the general items that are available for all of the heroes in Overwatch 2 Stadium. I'm doing a series of videos in which I do a breakdown of every single hero's hero items and powers. That is still ongoing because, well, there's 17 of them. But I also wanted to take the time to do a breakdown of all the general items, the items that are being used by all of the heroes. Mainly per request of you guys. It seems that a lot of people still haven't figured out how they all kind of work, which makes sense. So let's have a look. Welcome to my TED Talk about the more general items in Overwatch Stadium. But on the serious note, it is, in a way, a little bit confusing. There are just a lot of modifiers, as they call them, and it isn't always clear, especially because of the nature of the heroes, what does what and how it will affect your abilities and your weapons. But hopefully by the end of this video, it is going to be a little clearer for all of you, including myself, because I bumped into some stuff while doing research. Anyways, so as you all know, you basically have three big categories: weapon, ability, and survival. I think in general, everybody kind of understands that weapon will kind of basically boost everything that is related to your weapons. Abilities is going to boost your abilities, and survival is going to help you to stay alive. Those are more based on your health, but also just, you know, mitigation and all that kind of stuff. Now, the first tip I'm going to give you is to look at that thing at the left bottom, all these kind of indicators, these meters that I'm hovering over right now. If you click this panel, you actually get a more expanded panel where you'll see the impact of everything that you have picked and bought, and what it all does on the different parameters that we're discussing in this video. They will give you an idea on how much life you have, which is basically a combination of your health, your armor, and your shields. And in this case with Reinhardt, that is 550 at this point. They'll also give you an idea on how much you boosted your weapon damage. So that is the total amount of weapon power that you have. There's ability power, and there's attack speed, not unimportant. And the last one is cooldown reduction. Now this might sound really obvious, but weapon power is just going to augment the output that you do with your weapon. If you have more weapon power, every single bullet you shoot, let's say with Soldier, is going to do more damage. If you have more ability power, every single fire strike with Reinhardt is going to do more damage. Now attack speed is a different thing. Your bullets are going to do the same damage, but you'll be able to shoot more bullets in the same time frame. While cooldown reduction is basically doing the same thing with your abilities. It's going to lower the cooldown, allowing you to use your abilities more often. I think that is pretty clear. And anytime you pick an item that is involved in one of those metrics, you'll see that bump up. So if we get more weapon power, you'll see it go up. If we take more ability power, you'll see that go up. And let's see, let's add some shields, and there we go. Even before you actually add it, you'll see the number go up, and it will indicate green what it is going to be if you should select that item. So that gives you a good idea of get it or not. I mean, in the end, it's not a problem because you can sell all of your items pretty easily for the same price that you bought them. As I said earlier, you have three categories: weapon, ability, survival. You have three rarities: common, rare, and epic. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, you know that the ones that have more of a colored icon, those are the hero items. Those are specific to the hero that you're playing. So they are different for every single hero. The others that just have the green and black, let's call it, or blue and black and purple and black. It's not really black, it's just a more darkened version of the same color. But anyways, I digress. Those are general items. So those are going to be available for every single hero. And on top of that, they're always going to be in the same position for everybody. So there's not going to be any confusion. Once you know these items, once you know them by heart, once you know what they do, they're going to be the same for every single hero. It's only going to be the hero items that are going to be different. All right. Now with those rarities, there is one thing you need to keep in mind. Sometimes two green items will give you the same amount of statistics as one blue item will, with that difference that the blue item is way more expensive than the other two combined. Which might sound weird, but take into account that you can only equip 6 items. So that extra cash that you have to pay for the blue item is actually for the convenience of bringing those two items together in one and allowing you to add another item to one of the 6 slots. Now, in the early stages of the game where you don't have the cash to fill up those 6 spots, stick with the greens. Once you get to round 2 or 3, you're going to be able to add extra items and to fill up the 6 slots if you stick to the greens longer. So always keep an eye out for what value they bring you, what the cost is. And as long as you have slots available, who cares? So let me give you an example. We have the compensator and we have plasma converter. Those are 1,000 cash each. Compensator will give you 5% weapon power. Plasma converter is going to give you 10% weapon lifesteal. If you throw them both in there, it will cost you 2,000 cash. Now there is one item called Tank Knowledge, which does the same thing. It gives you 5% weapon power, 10% weapon lifesteal. That one will cost you 4,500. If you have the cash to spend, which in this case I have because I'm in the practice range, you can just stack them on top of each other. So at that point you have 10% weapon power and you have 20% weapon lifesteal. But I think you get my point. You need to economize. You need to think about what you buy. Another thing you need to take into account that is that some items will not benefit your hero at all. And they don't tell you. One of them, for instance, with Reinhardt, is the extra ammo. You get 20% max ammo. There's no ammo for Reinhardt. He has 2 fire strikes, which is an ability. And other than that, he has his infinite hammer swings. That's it. So be careful what you pick. I mean, I don't see anybody picking extra ammo for Reinhardt. I think that is clear. But maybe for some new people. Because that's basically it. Weapon items are tied into your main weapon, and in some cases your secondary weapon. And abilities are anything that is not directly related to you using your weapon. Like a secondary effect. In the case of Reinhardt, his fire strike is an ability. It's not a weapon. Now, in case it's not really clear what is an ability and what is a weapon, there is a way that you can see, but it is, well, it's not really hidden, but a lot of people don't know that it is there. If you look at the bottom right here, it says the left alt will show ability details. We press that, what it actually does is if I hover over an item right now, I can only see that it gives me 5% weapon power. However, if I press the left alt, it will switch to tooltips and give you a little more information. And in this case, it will show me that that weapon power is going to my rocket hammer. For ability, if I hover over 10% ability power, it will tell me that charge, earth shatter, and fire strike will benefit from this. I think that is quite important. I don't know why that would be toggled off, to be fair. Now, they promised us that these tooltips are going to be more detailed, that we're going to see a bigger breakdown of what it actually all means, because it is sometimes a little confusing or misleading even. Now, let's run over them one by one. We have Compensator, which is going to give me 5% weapon power, which is going to my rocket hammer in the case of Reinhardt. So let's have a look what that actually means. These bots have 200 health, we know that. And we know that one weapon swing of Reinhardt will do 100 damage. As you can see, half of the health is gone. That is 100. We're going to equip this 5% extra weapon power, and we swing again. We can see, if you look really closely, that it bumped up just a tiny bit, 5%. But just to get a better view of the effect, we're going to stack some weapon power. Let's start out with the big ones. 25%, 20%, 10%, 10%, 15, 10. We got it to 100% weapon power, which means that we should be one-shotting this bot, because 100% of 100 is 200. Let's see. And there it goes. So that is plain and simple. The next one is called Plasma Converter, and that has the 10% weapon lifesteal. Now, this one is a little more complicated. So what that actually does is, it gives me 10% of the damage I do to a target, it gives me back as life. That life is a combination of health, armor, and shields. Let me show you. So I'm going to take some damage first. One swing with my hammer still does 100 damage. Let's drop below 500. Alright, we're at 494. I'm swinging my hammer. And I bumped up to 504. That is 10 health, which is 10% of that 100 damage I did. Pretty basic. But that way, well, for every 10 swings I do, I get 100 health. Which is not bad. Especially if you start stacking it. Now, sadly, we can't stack it like we did with weapon power. I think there's only 2 instances of lifesteal. The green one and the blue one. That's it. And then you can do the same thing with your abilities. If you should choose so, but I think there's better ways of getting health. It isn't bad, but okay. Next up is Weapon Grease, which is going to give you 5% attack speed. I think that just talks for itself. You're going to be able to swing your hammer a little faster. In the case of Reinhardt, if you're playing Soldier, you're going to be shooting faster. That's basically it. As max ammo, as I said, that is not going to help you with Reinhardt, but for any other hero, like Soldier for instance, that is going to raise your clip with 20%. And then there's Frenzy Amplifier. Eliminations grant 10% attack speed and 50% move speed for 3 seconds. So anytime you kill someone for 3 seconds, you're going to get 10% extra attack speed, so more swings or more bullets, on top of 15% move speed, which means you're going to be running faster. For the rare weapon items, there's Aftermarket Firing Pin, 10% attack speed, 5% move speed, Advanced Nano Barrel takes 5% weapon power, and after healing an ally, you gain 10% attack speed for 3 seconds, which you'll not be doing as Reinhardt, although he does have powers where he heals people, but just holding up his shield, so never say never. Shield Buster, 5% weapon power. After dealing damage to shields or armor, gain 15% attack speed for 1 second. Stockpile, 5% attack speed and 25% max ammo, which is not useful for Rocket Hammer. I don't know why that is under there. Techno Leech is the one that we discussed earlier. That gives you the 5% weapon power and the 10% weapon lifesteal that you can get from 2 separate greens. There's Ice Coolant, 10% weapon power and 5% cooldown reduction. Talent Modification Module at 15% weapon power. And then we go into the epics, and that's where things get a little more intense. With the greens, you just have 1 stat. With the rares, you usually have 2 stats, and with the epics, you have 2 stats and something on top of it. It's not the rule, but that's how it kind of ends up. Anyways, Codebreaker gives you 15% weapon power and ignores 50% of the armor damage reduction. So armor will lower the damage that you take. If you have this item, you'll basically negate that property of armor for 50% at least. I mean, at some point you need a calculator to really understand how much damage it's going to do and how beneficial it's going to be. But I don't think you need to do that. I think you just need to assess who you have in front of you and how you can counter them. And at some point you're going to feel the result rather than doing the math. Salvage slugs, 10% attack speed, 30% increased damage to bears. Dealing weapon damage to bears has a 50% chance to restore 1 ammo, which in Reinhardt's case means nothing, but some of the other heroes are going to benefit from that. And the 30% increased damage to bears is, yeah, you know who I'm talking about, right? She's going down. Volskaya Ordnance. Oh, look at that. Isn't that a coinkydink? 10% attack speed, deal 5% increased weapon damage for every 100 max life the target has more than you, up to 20%. So if you have a squishy character, that is going to benefit. If you are Reinhardt, it's not going to be as useful, because you are usually the one with the biggest life pool. Commander's Clip, 10% attack speed, 50% max ammo, and we use an ability to restore 10% of your max ammo. So that one actually ties your ability into your weapon. The Weapon Jammer, 25 armor and 10% weapon power. Dealing weapon damage negates 10% of the target's bonus attack speed and increases your attack speed by 10% for 2 seconds. So not only does that apply a buff to yourself, but it also applies a debuff to your target. Debuffs are usually pretty strong, because they don't have any control over it. You do. Amari's Antidote, 25 health, 15% weapon power. While healing an ally below 50% life with your weapon, deal 15% increased weapon healing. I mean, it's not a coincidence that it's called Amari's Antidote. In this case, for instance, like I said, Reinhardt can heal, but he does it with his shield, which is an ability, so this is not going to help him. Booster Jets, 20% attack speed. When you use an ability, gain 20% movement speed for 2 seconds. Let me quickly jump in here. This is Deemzies from the future when I'm editing this video. Now, since I recorded this piece, they actually released a hotfix that nerfed this item. So for Booster Jets, the move speed when using an ability is 10%, not 20. So they nerfed that. Alright, let's continue. Elsaka Suppressor, 10% weapon power. Critical hits apply 30% healing reduction to the target for 2 seconds. Healing reduction is good. That basically means that anything that the healers will put into that target is going to be less potent, less strong. It's not going to work as good. 30% reduction is pretty substantial. That can make a huge difference. Hardlight Accelerator, 10% weapon power, 10% cooldown reduction. And we use an ability gain 5% weapon power for 3 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. This could actually work pretty well for Reinhardt. You need to pull off 3 abilities within a short time span, and you can get 15% weapon power. So weapon power is his rocket hammer. His abilities is his 5-strike, his charge, and his ultimate. If you use charge and then follow up with 2 5-strikes and then start swinging the hammer, that is going to get 15% extra damage. The Closer, 20% weapon power, 10% critical damage. So anytime you get a critical hit, so let's say you hit him in the head, it is going to do 10% more damage. On top of that, the critical hits reveal the target for 3 seconds. Now in the case of Reinhardt, this would not be useful because... for Reinhardt, this is not useful because he can't crit with his fire strike, so... But there's plenty of heroes that can. Alright, I have the Spider, 25% weapon power, and deal 10% increased damage to enemies below 30% life. It kinda speaks for itself. If your targets are low, you're going to do 10% extra damage. And the others are basically hero powers, so... Alright, let's move over to ability. We basically get the same story. In essence, you got ability power, you got ability lifesteal. There are some different items in the abilities though that we don't have in the weapon. For instance, the charge plating, after you spend your ultimate charge, gain 25 armor and 10% ability power for the rest of the round. So that means till that round is over, you're going to get 25 armor and 10% ability power, because you used your ultimate once. If you manage to stack a lot of powers that will get you to your ultimate pretty fast, that might be useful. There is another way to do it. When you die, you gain 50% ultimate charge. Yeah. That'll get you there, on top of the 25 health that you get. That one is calling Winning Attitude. Love the names. Alright, let's get into the rare ones. There's Custom Stock, which gives you 5% weapon power and 10% ability power. There's a mix of those two. Like I said, keep an eye open, because this one is actually more expensive than the other two combined, but, you know, be mindful of what you buy. Biolite Overflow, 25 health and 5% ability power. When you spend your ultimate charge, grant nearby allies 50 overhealth for 3 seconds. So if you slam, if you do your Earth Shatter, everybody around you is going to get 50 overhealth, and then in case your team is in trouble, I mean, I wouldn't use it on Reinhardt necessarily, but Energized Bracers, you get 10% ability power and 10% ability lifesteal. There's Junker Watchamajig, 25% starting ultimate charge. That might sound tempting, but I think there's better ways to get to your ultimate, at least in my opinion. Wrist Wraps, there's 5% ability power and 10% attack speed. Multi-Tool, 5% ability power and 10% cooldown reduction. Nano Cola, 20% ability power. If we go to the epic items, there's 3-strap Tommy Gun, 10% ability power and 10% attack speed. After using an ability, your next 3 instances of weapon damage deal additional damage equal to 3% of the target's life. That one sounds really long, but let's break it down. So basically, anytime you use an ability, your weapon is going to do more damage, but that damage is going to be dependent on how much health your target has left. 3%. So let's say that you have a 350 health target in front of you, May. You're going to get 3% of that 350 is going to be added on your 3 next swings that you do with your hammer. That's basically it. Like I said, at some instances you might need a calculator, but the best way to do it is to try it, feel the result, and see if it's something that you want to use. Biotech Maximizer, 25 health, 10% ability power. When you use an ability that heals, reduce its cooldown by 5% for each unique ally it heals. Juno actually has this one power where she will get a cooldown reduction for every target that she hits. If you stack this one on top of it, you actually amplify that. Catalytic Crystal, 15% ability power, ability damage and healing grants 20% more ultimate charge. Like I said, if you want to get to your ultimate pretty fast, there are better ways of doing it. Lumerica Fusion Driver, 50 armor, that is quite substantial, 15% ability power, and when you use your ability, restore 50 armor or shield over 2 seconds. Super Flexor, 25 health, 10% weapon power, and when you deal weapon damage or healing, gain 5% ability power for 3 seconds, stacking up to 5 times, so that is 25 in total for those 3 seconds. That is basically the reverse of the one we had earlier. Cyber Venom, 10% ability power, 5% cooldown reduction, dealing ability damage applies 30% healing reduction for 2 seconds. Again, debuff, but this time on your abilities. Iridescent Iris, 20% ability power, that is quite a big one, 10% cooldown reduction, also not bad. And after spending your ultimate charge, gain 100 overhealth for 3 seconds. That's for those people that get themselves in trouble when using the ultimate. Liquid Nitrogen, 25 health, 10% ability power, and dealing ability damage slows the target's move speed by 20% for 3 seconds. So everybody is a Mei in that case. Mark of the Kitsune, 10% ability power, and when you use an ability, your next instance of weapon damage or healing deals 25 bonus damage or healing. But that one is going to be multiplied depending on how much ability power you have. That's why you see that little icon. Champion's Kit, 40% ability power, and then there's hero items. And then the final category are, of course, the survival items, and those are kind of all over the place. There's Adrenaline Shot, which will give you 10 health, and the health packs grant 20% move speed for 5 seconds and 50 overhealth. So a health pack suddenly becomes way more interesting. Electrolytes, at the start of the round, gain 100 unrecoverable overhealth. So you start out with that overhealth, and once it's gone, it's gone. Field rations, while on the objective, restore 8 life every 1 second. So if you're staying on the payload, you're going to be healed extra fast. Running shoes, at the start of the round, and when you first respawn, gain 20% movement speed for 10 seconds while out of combat. Armored Vest, 25 armor. First aid kit, 25 shield, reduces the time before your life begins to regenerate by 33%. So basically the self-heal is going to kick in faster. At 1/3, so 33%. The heartbeat sensor, 5% move speed, enemies below 30% life are revealed to you. It can be handy depending on who you're playing, that you see the low targets to finish them off. And then Siphon Gloves, 25 health, and quick melee damage heals for 25 life. Okay, let's move over to the rare items. Reinforced Titanium, 25 shields. While you have shields, take 15% reduced ability damage. That one is actually not bad. Cushion Padding, 25 shields, min 40% incoming negative effect duration. Anything they throw on you that is a debuff is going to last for 40% less long. On top of that, when affected by stun, sleep, or hinder, restore 10% of your max life over 3 seconds. Not only is the duration going to be shorter, it's also going to heal you. They're actually doing you a favor by putting you to sleep. Everybody needs a good nap once in a while. Ironclad Exhaust Ports, 5% cooldown reduction. When you use an ability, gain 25 overhealth for 3 seconds. And for any hero that uses their abilities pretty often, that is a good one. Vishkar Condenser, 25 shields, convert 100 health into shields. That is the way to get shields as any character. Vitality, I need to read that again. Vitality? I don't know. I'm missing something. 10 armor, convert 100 health into armor. Crusader's Hydraulics, 25 armor. While you have armor, take 10% reduced weapon damage. Iron Eyes, 25 shields, you take 20% reduced damage from critical hits. Mecha Z series, 8% health, armor, shields. This one might read a little confusing. What it basically means is that it is going to look at the total of your life, which is your health, your armor, and your shields, and it is just going to add 8% on top of that. In this case, Reinhardt has 550 life. Use this one and he has 594, which is the 8%. All right, the others are hero items, and then in the epic category, Genetics Vial, 25 health. The first time you would die each round, revive instead with 200 life after 3 seconds. I know that this one is going to sound tempting for a lot of people, but I don't know. You don't want to get yourself in that situation where everybody dies, you're the last to die, and you come back to die again, and basically you're feeding. Bloodhound, 50 health. The last enemy to deal a final blow to you is revealed when nearby. So you can just get your murderer, basically. Deal 10% more damage to them and take 10% reduced damage from them. That revenge is incoming, friends. Divine Intervention, 50 shields. When you take more than 100 damage at once, restore 15% of your damage taken and start regenerating your shields. Gloom Gauntlet, 50 armor, 15% melee damage, and damage grants 10% move speed and restores 5% of the max life over 2 seconds. A Martian Mender, 25 health, 10% cooldown reduction, and restores 3% of your life every 1 second. Phantasmic Flux, 10% weapon power, 10% ability power, 15% weapon lifesteal, and a 50% ability lifesteal. When you're at your full life, lifesteal grants up to 100 over health. So this is just going to bump up everything, and it is going to help you to lifesteal all the extra damage that you do. Rüstung von Wilhelm, that is my worst German. 50% health, armor, shields. That's basically the same thing as we had earlier, where instead of 40 we go up 80. And then Vanadium Injection. This one is for when you keep your ultimate charge. It is basically kind of similar to the previous one. You get 10% weapon power, 10% ability power, but you also get attack speed, 10% cooldown reduction, and 10% move speed. So not only are you going to attack faster, you're going to get your abilities back faster, but you're also going to move faster on top of the weapon damage and the ability damage. But you can't use your ultimate or it's all gone. Nebula Conduit, 50 health, 10% weapon power, and prevent 15% of incoming damage and instead take the prevented damage over 3 seconds. So it is going to take 15% of the damage that you take and spread it out. It's like you put the damage on Leeway, but eventually it's going to catch up with you, just like Leeway does. And here I am again, Deemzies from the future, because they also nerfed this item since I recorded this. For Nebula Conduit, the weapon power is 5% down from 10. That was all actually. All the rest should still be the same. Enjoy. And then the final one is Ugudimo's Reduction Field. 50 armor, and when you take damage, gain 0.5% damage reduction for 1 second, stacking up to 20 times. So that is 10% in total. And that was all of the general items. I hope this helped out at least a little bit. There's actually so much more to talk about, but I wanted to kind of, I'm not going to say keep it to the essence, because this has turned out to be a very long video. But not go in too deep, so it doesn't get too confusing, if that makes any sense. Anyways, let me know in the comments what you thought about this video. For now, however, that was it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It always helps me out. I also want to thank my patrons and YouTube members. You too can become a member over on patreon.com/theomnicpost and right here on YouTube to unlock exclusive rewards. If you have a few minutes left, maybe check out one of my other videos. But above all, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Bye-bye.